We're talking about similarities between how it says that they made ugot, and later on in Shmot, it says that they made cakes of matzah. And it says that the men were stopped in Sdom with a blinding light, but it was blinding darkness that appears in Shmot. So there's clearly connections back and forth.
Yeah. Foreshadowing.
Do you think that all night? Yeah.
So Rav, so you outright reject that the Torah is giving foreshadowing to future events? I know this might play into the Christian hand as well, but is there such thing as foreshadowing?
There isn't foreshadowing from an authoritative perspective. You could see it, someone else could see it, right? But to say that you're going to exclude someone just because they happen not to see what you see is where the problem begins. Now, there's enough to exclude people for and by with what appears in the Torah already, like for you to exclude them because of some foreshadowing. Now, this is something that the Kabbalistic world partakes in as well, with the whole notion of Pardes. Now, yes, I know Pardes appears by Chazal, but not as the acronym that appears in Lurianic Kabbalah of Pashat, Remes, Darash, and Sod. That, it doesn't appear. It talks about the place of Rabbi Akiva and Acher. It's not the same. Even the Rambam considers Pardes something else. He considers it secular knowledge. But the reason I mentioned the Kabbalistic rabbis and Pardes is that they believe that now, because of Pashat, Remes, Drash, and Sod, and we believe in Pashat and we believe in Drash, but the notion that I think is very destructive is the notion of Remes and Sod. So Remes is foreshadowing, basically hints in the text, and Sod is just outright esoteric secrets that only a select few have knowledge of. Now, that's fine if you want to feel that you've interpreted Torah in one of those avenues. The problem is when you start believing that any of that could possibly be authoritative. And that's what Pardes is. Pardes is an authoritative way to institute new ideas within the Jewish people from something that they also believe was given in Har Sinai. This is why it's very dangerous to start just saying everything was given on Mount Sinai, right? Because they're saying, oh, well, this is Kabbalistic knowledge that was given on Mount Sinai, and it was passed down from teacher to student, even though there's no hint of it in Torah Shebektav like this, and there's no hint of it in the Talmud of some sort of mystical tradition. Outside of Maaseh Merkava, which no one really knows exactly what it is. Well, the Rambam writes in Mor Nevuchim that there was a mystical tradition, but he never received it. But I'm just saying, like, what would be wrong with a Muslim or a Christian or a Mormon doing the same thing? Like, well, the Book of Mormon was actually given to Moses on Mount Sinai, and it was passed down from Mormon to Mormon, and here it is, like right in front of you. Like, do you feel a burning in the bosom? You'd be able to justify any silly idea if you bring in the notion of Remez and Sod into the mix from an authoritative perspective.
Right. So the wrong takeaway would be to say Sinat Chinam was seen from the beginning with the story of Cain, and if you don't believe that, then you're not, a good Jew or whatever.
Right. But even the notion of Sinat Chinam, I have a whole video on why the Churban happened, why the destruction of the temple happened. It's just one of the reasons given. There's actually 10 reasons given by Chazal for the temple being destroyed, but because of the whole hippie Shlomo Carlebach world, the whole notion of Achadut takes over. No, it's about us accepting all Jews on a level playing field. Nonsense. As a matter of fact, it says that one of the reasons the temple was destroyed was Hanufa. So Hanufa is flattery. So it's not this notion that Jews back then got together on the basis that they were Jewish. Nonsense. If you were a kofar, if you were an actual man, you were persecuted. If you fell in a well, they wouldn't pull you out. This whole notion that back then atheistical Jews were dancing along with religious Jews is nonsense. This is why this notion of putting on tefillin on people in the street just because they happen to have Jewish blood is also nonsense. Nonsense in the sense that it doesn't appear by Chazal, and for sure doesn't appear in Torah.
I had just one more question, if that's okay. And it's only now this one would be. No, so this one is a little bit more of a pushback, and not because I necessarily believe it, but to your point about better to have Christians try to become Jewish, or it's easier than the versus atheists.
Just to make it clear what I said, it's better that if a Jew is not going to accept Orthodox Judaism, it's better if it becomes a Christian or a Messianic than remain, let's say, an atheist.
Right. Okay. So on that basis, I guess I have to excuse as a side any potential cultural fears of like, if assuming that it's better for them to become Christian if they're not going to become Orthodox. So we could set aside maybe any cultural fears of like the Inquisition or Crusades coming back, right? But if atheists versus Christians are potentially able to commit acts of good without the guide of Torah, and would do so for individualistic reasons, like the Christian would have his own reasons, the atheist will have their own reasons, but it's not based on Torah. Any acts of good or kindness, isn't it better to do acts of kindness without the expectations of the afterlife?
I think so. Yeah.
Because that would be what the atheists would do. Because then, by that standard, it would be preferable to have the population be more atheist than Christian. Because acts of kindness done in that society are done not for the sake of an afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good point.
So
we're going back to it again. I mean, we're going full circle, Rav. Is it better to do mitzvot for Hakadosh Baruch Hu or for?
Sorry, I just want to.
I think that we're dealing with consistency here. That an atheist makes up his ethics as he goes along, that the Christian would be more consistently ethical than an atheist. Why? Because a Christian knows that murdering is wrong because the Bible tells him murdering is wrong. But an atheist could think that murdering is right. And who are you to tell him any different? If he listens to you from any authoritative ethical perspective, then he's making you God. I'm also of the opinion, and I think that's the message in Torah. It's religion that teaches you otherwise, that you should do commandments because of reward in heaven. It seems that the Avos, that the patriarchs did what was right for the sake of doing right. Nowhere in Tanakh does it mention a heaven or a hell. Literally, like if someone took the Torah literally, they wouldn't come to that perspective. I ultimately don't care why people do good, but I think it's better for them, for their own personal development, to do what's right for the sake of doing right, and not just because they're seeking a reward. But ultimately, I care who does the most good. And if you're going to argue that atheists do more good in this world than Christians, then that's where we differ.
Not only that, I mean, an atheist basically creates a God in his own image. Therefore, I mean, it's still a form of idolatry if we're really going to break it down, because you can't, like, I mean, even if you are consistent, you're doing it for a specific reason. You say, oh, well, I'm doing it just for the good of humanity. Well, where'd you get those standards? What do you call good? Oh, you call, helping the widow and the poor good. Okay, so does the Bible. So where are you getting your standards from? And
it'd still be a foreign worship. Whatever ideology the atheist would have, it would still be foreign worship.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I'm not married to the idea of Judaism. I've been Jewish for over 23 years. Okay. Well, the reason I'm religious is because religious people do more good in this world. If atheists did more good in this world, then you know what? I would become atheist. Okay, but that's not the case. Any atheistical society has always left a trail of death and carnage. Why is that? Why is it that we can point to one atheistical society that progresses ethically? Why? Because there is no standard. And it reiterates with that statement in Mishlei that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. Even this epidemic makes me very proud to be a religious person, because I see that it's not the religious acting all hysterical and panicking. I think the religious person is able to deal with tragedy a lot better than an atheist is. Why? Because perhaps the belief in the afterlife is comforting. Now, I do believe in an afterlife, but I just believe that the Torah doesn't command me to believe in one. And I don't think the Torah wants me to do the right thing just to get to heaven. But I think what the Torah does want us to do is come to this realization that if God is a good God, if he's a just God, there has to be more than this world. Why? Because of justice. Because there's evil people who get away doing very bad things, and there's good people who die without getting also what they deserve. So yes, we have to account for silly beliefs in religion, but an atheist has to account for everything else. So I encourage atheists, just for the sake of family, giving them, their children, something greater to aspire to than just the feelings of their heart, to act like a God exists, than to give their kids nothing and watch their kids probably adopt a very dangerous belief system like radical Islam. Now, yes, I would agree that it would be better if every radical Muslim tomorrow became atheist. And we're not mentioning Islam, that we're talking about who does the most good in this world. I think doing evil in the name of God is the worst thing you could do. This is really the unforgivable offense, carrying God's name in vain, basically doing evil in the name of God. So there it shows at least one instance that I give atheism credit.
All right.
You guys don't think atheists have just innate goodness? There's some people with just a good spirit, or grew up right or were raised right.
Absolutely. I think that atheists and humanists could claim to be ethical because they have an ethical backbone to them, mainly because almost everyone alive today has a religious grandparent, someone who inspired them in their life. You know what? Even living in America, it's hard to deny the biblical values that run through every aspect of life. So it's easy to claim to be ethical and atheistical. But I think it's really what's called cut flower ethics, that once you separate your actions from the source, eventually your philosophy will end up catching up with you. And this is what we see in North Korea, Cambodia, Cuba, the former Soviet Union. People trying to reinvent the wheel ethically and failing miserably.
Someone wants to know the address for the sign up for the conversions.
TorahJudaism.com/conversion.
There you go.